Hello everyone, this is Data Driven Formula One with Patrick Henz and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi Patrick.
Hello, Ganna. Hello, all. Nice to be back. And today with Keke Rosberg, quite fascinating character.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, looking forward to it, definitely.
Right, and typical 1980s, as you see. So I think it will be a quite good and interesting episode. You see?
Yeah, I'm just going to remind everyone that obviously this is a podcast, but
Yeah.
we are also present on YouTube, and I kind of prefer that you watch us on YouTube because we are showing quite a lot of visual material on YouTube, and yeah, we sort of invite you to obviously to comment, and we don't claim that we know it all, so please by all means tell us if we forgot something or missing something, and we always obviously appreciate likes and subscriptions.
Right, and let's say and if it would not be on YouTube, but let's say on Netflix, Amazon, Disney, you would see quite a trigger warning. You will see a lot of people smoking, as we are really now in the middle of the 1980s. And I think if there's one Formula One driver with the most iconic 80s look, cigarette, sunglasses, long blonde hair, then I think it's Keke Rosberg, as you see on this photo if you see us on YouTube or Spotify.
Yeah, I just want to say that obviously we are very much anti-smoking with Patrick, but we did have several episodes on kind of the role of tobacco companies in racing. And I mean, the reason why I picked this photograph is that where Keke Rosberg is smoking is not to kind of promote smoking, on the contrary, but you know, it's just it's very difficult to find his photos when he's not smoking. So it's about, like, I would say 70 to 80% of photos from back in the day in the 80s where he has he's pictured with a cigarette. So
that's right, and this also shows. I mean, we discussed it, for example, with Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda was the first Formula One driver, maybe, who discovered the importance of fitness. So he started his personal fitness program after his unfamous accident. And due to my knowledge, he was a not smoker. At least I don't remember any photo where he smoked. But nevertheless, in the 80s, there still had been a relevant number of Formula One drivers smoking, and it was not only Keke Rosberg. Something which today I think would be unlikely, not only because of maybe the social acceptance, which is not that big anymore in society, but also as today's Formula One drivers are perfect athletes. I don't think we would have smokers again in Formula One. Maybe some of the last had been Eddie Irvine, I would assume.
right. Well, I mean, so this is a person who probably worked very hard all his career. And, you know, we often talk about the talent, and some people are very natural. I think to him it probably didn't come very natural. But he definitely worked a lot to win a championship eventually.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he's one of the most iconic Finnish drivers of all time. Not only because he was a champion himself, but also he's father of Nico Rosberg, whom you all know.
Right.
So yeah, I mean the same last names are not a coincidence; they are related.
Yeah.
And we will talk about Nico Rosberg a little bit today as well.
Exactly. So a little bit to the statistics. Keke Rosberg, born 6th of December on St. Nicholas Day, 1948 in Solna, Sweden. Nevertheless, he is Finnish because his parents had been living temporary in Solna, Sweden, but then returned to Finland. He started his Formula One career in Theodore, very small team. ATS, then Wolf, Fittipaldi, Williams, and McLaren, 128 entries, only 5 victories, but this helped him gaining 1 championship. So he was a quite rational driver, so somebody more in the style maybe of Niki Lauda, less such a big emotional person. So a typical cliche for somebody from Finland.
Yeah, and I think it's just a perseverance and grit that sort of got him there eventually. Yeah, so we always, like I said, we always talk about kind of talent and kind of passion, but this is kind of hard work. And yeah, and this is Keke Rosberg with Nico Rosberg.
Yeah.
As you can see. Yeah. So, and like I said, you probably, even if you never heard about Keke Rosberg, you definitely heard about Nico Rosberg. Yeah, that's father and son.
Right, and I remember this is a photo after he finished his career in Formula One and after he finished also his engagement with Peugeot in the sports car. He had been quite active in the German touring car championship, driving, I think, first for Opel and then switched to Mercedes-Benz or the other way around. And so here you see him still as a driver for the Opel Calibra Old Spice team. And as you said, with his son, Nico. But let's first go back in time. And I think a very nice photo with him and his go-kart. So at start, as it's quite typical for Formula One drivers, his parents had been Lars Rosberg, mother Leo Lautela, both native of the little town of Hamina in Finland. His father done something completely different than racing. He had been a veterinary scientist, and nevertheless, Keke and also later his son Nico discovered racing for themselves.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if you look at this photo, I mean, this cart is definitely a little bit too small for him, but
Yes.
and it also kind of shows you that when you would get into karting, you would be already quite old. I mean, these days children start doing karting from the age of 4. So it's very, or it's actually a lot easier probably to get experience from very, very young age. But back in the day, you couldn't start that early. And so yeah, this is kind of the cart that he drove when he was young.
Right. If you see the photo, I mean, it's today this would be nearly the age where you enter already in Formula One.
Yeah,
Not quite, nearly
much.
it looks that way.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So and here are a little bit of data what you already mentioned. He started his racing debut in with 29. Again, this is practically the age where today you retire in Formula One. He started in Formula V. This is in the Formula Super V. We discussed this formula a little bit when we talked about Emerson Fittipaldi. This had been monoposto cars practically with the engine of the Volkswagen. I think it's the Beetle. No, it's not a Beetle, but it's a Volkswagen engine. So it's a quite relatively cheap or cheaper series. Then he switched to the Can-Am series, Formula Atlantic, similar to Formula One, Formula Pacific. Then classically Formula 2, and from Formula 2 he made the jump to Formula 1.
That's right. And again, I just want to say that it's all this perseverance. Of course, he was a talented driver, but at the same time, he didn't give up when something didn't work. Yeah. And when we talk about McLaren, I mean, we will see even more of this.
Right. And then let's come to Formula 1. He made his debut at the end of the 1970s, exactly in 78, at a team, Theodore, quite interesting team. To be honest, we never really spoke about them. It's an English name, so you may think one of the typical British garage team, but the opposite. It was a team founded by real estate magnate in Hong Kong, Teddy Yip. It existed in Formula 1 from 1977 to 83, so for a small team, quite a long time. 51 Grand Prix, entering a total of 64 cars. So in the 1970s, 1980, one of the smaller teams where you typically started your career, because in opposite to today's Formula 1, the big teams don't have their smaller teams, but we had these independent small teams where you typically started your career as a younger driver. This Theodore racing team still exists today, managed by Teddy Chip Jr., and now they are competing in the Macau Grand Prix. So not the big racing leagues anymore, but some local ones. So a team which is still around.
Yeah, that's right. And so obviously, I mean, as you can imagine, the other team wasn't great. And it was so not great that mid-season Keke Rosberg switched to ATS. And it's a sort of, but on the other hand, of course, it gave him some starting experience in Formula One, which was definitely useful later on.
Yeah, and he not only struggled, of course, with this car, which not have been really able to compete, have been quite in the back of the group. So he, as you said, he switched to RTS, and then the same year he switched back to Theodore, which also shows that he was also struggling a little bit with sponsorship money. So he had to see where he got opportunities to race. And Theodore, he returned there. They acquired the chassis from the Formula 1 team from Wolf Racing. And then we come to 1979, 81, when he now switched to Wolf, which in the year before provided the older chassis to Theodore. So now he became officially to the Wolf team, which was on the paper a quite good move because they had been successful, especially one was with Jody Scheckter some years ago, but unfortunately had been slowly on the decline already. And due to this, they had been on the way out, and the team was practically sold to Fittipaldi.
And we know how that went.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because we discussed Fittipaldi before. We have a special. And Emerson Fittipaldi, and we kind of talked a lot about how you probably shouldn't be working with your brother, and probably shouldn't go at the peak of your career to a really tiny team and that probably struggles for money, and so on and so forth. But yeah, in terms of the move, it probably was a good move for Keke Rosberg, but of course, Fittipaldi car wasn't competitive, as we know, and yeah.
Yeah, but I would assume on a character aside, he should have been a great move. I would see him from the character a little bit similar to Emerson Fittipaldi. If you saw our episode, both Fittipaldi brothers, they also started via the quite cheap super fees local series, which had been quite successful in Brazil. So they had a little bit some similarities. So I would think on a personal character side, he was a good fit for the team, especially as he was a diligent worker, didn't crash too much, which is important for small teams. So, I mean, was a good fit, even of course, you couldn't get much countable results driving for the Fittipaldi team at that time. Then I think with the next move, then he finally got a competitive car. We're speaking about 1982. Besides, not really convincing with countable results, he made it to get a seat at Williams, which had been looking for a replacement for their 1980 champion Alan Jones. So he made it into the team. Besides Carlos Reutemann, their #1 driver, which luckily for Rosberg, and we discussed it in our 1982 season, left, I think, after the first or second race of the season, retired, maybe because he wanted to focus on his political career. Also, we had this political problems between Argentina and UK related the Marinas in Spanish or the Falkland Islands in English. So and with this, he came out of the sudden #1 driver and had a shot at the championship.
That's right, and obviously it was if we talk about his performance in Formula One, this was a relatively successful year for him, and he kind of consistently would get some points, and actually was I think up to that date, that was the most successful year for him.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
I mean,
1982.
Of course, because he won the championship at a time, and I said there had been various factors coming together, changing to Williams, retirement, Carlos Reutemann, the tragic accidents of those Ferrari drivers. But nevertheless, you get such chances to win a championship, and when you get the chance, you have to be there. So with this, I not want to limit here the achievements of Keke Rosberg, because again, if you get the chance, you must be prepared, and only if you're prepared for this chance you get maybe once in your lifetime, then you are able to get it.
Yeah, I just want to say to people who are watching us on YouTube and Spotify that again, you see Keke Rosberg smoking in the picture, and also I want to say that we discussed 1982 season in detail with Patrick, so please have a look at our YouTube channel for that episode. But the remarkable thing about that season was that Keke Rosberg only won one race, but because he consistently scored points in every single race, he managed to win. So he had a little bit of a winning margin there. And it is it is all often kind of discussed as a controversial win. However, this is also a completely fair strategy to consistently score and win. And like I said, this is why, I mean, in my opinion, he's actually the driver who achieved his win through kind of grit, through perseverance, rather than through, being lucky with a particular team or having a superior car or being kind of a passionate driver that just took a lot of risk, or he really just was kind of very professionally doing his job and being very consistent and very, very persistent in his desire to win.
Yeah, and we also have here to add, if we discussed, he only won one victory that year. His car, the Williams 1982, was a natural aspired Ford Cosworth. So related to the speed, he was without chances against the Brabham BMW, Renaults, or the Ferraris, which have been much faster. The big advantage also here of the car, it was reliable in opposite to the turbo cars. So we had different turbo cars winning the different races, but they had a lot of technical problems. So constantly, Keke Rosberg, also with this reliable Ford Cosworth engine, had been able always to get into the points. Not so much winning the single races, but constantly being directly behind the top turbo cars, and this was also an important factor that year. And for your defense of statistics, there had been two drivers who won the championship with just one victory. The other one had been 1958, Mike Hawson, but difficult to compare because the 1958 season had a relevant number less races than the championships in the 1980s. So if you are on YouTube or Spotify, here you have one of the few photos where he's not smoking.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And yeah, this is probably the most commonly seen photo, because I believe Wikipedia uses it. And yeah, so indeed, and this is actually, so even though we will now talk about 1983, this is actually a picture from 1982 when he won the championship. Right. So, and in 1983, he found himself in a place when he had to defend his title.
Yeah.
But there is always a but.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the turbo engines improved, and Williams obviously didn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he basically was at all of a sudden at a disadvantage because he didn't have the turbocharged car.
Exactly, until the very last race. So Williams continued with a conservative strategy, using again the natural aspired Ford engine. But as you said, the turbos sorted out their problems. So now they not only had been fast, but more regularly also could finish the races. So he hadn't had any opportunity to defend his title. But then at the last race, finally Williams came with the famous Honda V6 turbo engine, which many of us still relate with the Williams team of the 1980s. But as an interesting side note, Williams had been, of course, the more famous team using the Honda engine, but they had not been the first one. They debuted at some races earlier, I think mid-season, with the very small Spirit team, which didn't have any countable success with the engine. But at least I can say that Spirit had been the one having first the Honda engine, and only in the very last race Williams presented his turbo powered Honda car.
That's right, and I mean this is very topical because Honda again is coming back to to Formula One as an engine supplier.
Yeah.
As we know, and yeah, they kind of making these comebacks quite regularly. So at one point they were making engines for McLaren like very recently, and yeah, we talked about Honda separately with Patrick again. Please have a look. And yeah, we also discussed generally Japanese companies in Formula One. So we have a special on that. And yeah, so Honda is always an interesting case because, you know, sometimes the performance is really brilliant and sometimes it's not so great. And well, it's always a lottery. But, you know, talking about this specific season, Keke Rosberg finished in the 5th place. And it was a very decent place considering all the problems with the car.
I agree to this. Thanks. But then Keke Rosberg and Williams struggled using the Honda. Even if they've been powerful, there had been a little bit of problem with the chassis. It was more still based on the company's experience over a long time with the Ford Cosworth engine. So they hadn't the experience to make a chassis which really could handle this big amount of power. We are speaking about 850 HP, so not very reliable. And due to this, Keke Rosberg quite frustrated with Williams and only an 8th place in the championship.
Yeah, that's right, and it's like we talked about that many times. That, you know, Formula One is a lottery, so one year you have a competitive car, and the next year, even if you stay with the same team, you might have completely uncompetitive car. And I mean, this is just was one of those things. And actually, you know, as you know, Keke Rosberg also has driven for McLaren, and it just so happens that I know several people from McLaren who back in the day worked for the team, and they told me that he kind of was quite a quote unquote unlucky driver, meaning that, for example, when he was with McLaren, there was always something wrong with the car, and they told me there was always something different that was wrong with the car every time. So maybe it was also the case here, right? Because I mean, the Williams wasn't too bad, but I mean, he seemed to have this sort of a little bit of unlucky pattern, meaning that there was always a problem, and yeah. So, and he's quite a kind of the kind of muscling type of driver, not a, you know, like elegantly styled driver. So he's quite so you can see basically this the difference between him and other drivers in races if you watch original footage from 1980s. And you know, very often you basically had issues with the car when with that style of driving.
Yeah. Then 1985, he received a new teammate, Nigel Mansell, of course, a very fast driver, and now a British driver in a British team. So it seems that Mansell had been built up to be the new driver, and together with technical problems. I mean, as typically, if it's not working that good anymore in the job, you get also problems on personal level. And it seems in 1985, the relation between Frank Williams, Patrick Head, and Keke Rosberg hadn't been the best. And Keke Rosberg resumed it. We simply could not stand each other anymore. And when you are at that point, I think no surprise that you're looking for a change. And this change happened then in 1986. As you mentioned, he changed to Marlboro, and a lot of luck, as I remember this also the season, and maybe it was because of the color. I'm not sure if it was the whole season, but I remember at least in some races, Keke Rosberg, they tried out a potential new color, a little bit more orange red. So Marlboro, the Marlboro marketing department had been thinking maybe we should change a little bit our design and change the red. So Alain Prost was driving in the classic Marlboro red, and Keke Rosberg had a little bit more orange, yellowish red, as far as I remember.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, there were very many problems with the car, and it was not because I mean something was done differently with his car. But you know, it's also we need to understand that. For example, Alan Prost, he's a very sort of this elegant driver, right? Very, very smooth.
Yeah.
and Keke Rosberg is completely the reverse. So that's like on another side of the spectrum. And of course, if you are trying to tune in your cars for the more kind of elegant style of driving, like very, gentle, then it will not work for both drivers when you have such big differences in driving style. So like I said, it's just what I heard. Again, this is just sort of based on just a couple of opinions. Well, he kind of had this quite unlucky pattern with McLaren, where something was always wrong.
Yeah, and maybe it triggered having the bad luck also had been triggered a little bit by his driving style, as it may be a little bit better suited for the natural aspired Ford engines in opposite to the turbo engine, which still had been a little bit more fragile. So somebody taking care a little bit more, being a little bit more elegant, handling the car, of course it triggers are maybe a little bit less getting into problems.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the result of this, he retired in Formula One, and later he mentioned in interviews that he had the idea already after, or not after, but in the mid-1984 season to retire, but he had been convinced to continue, but now he saw that maybe it's time for him to leave. Maybe he got tired, maybe bad luck, or maybe he thought my driving style is not the best for the turbo age.
Yeah, but that's also, I think, the age, right? I mean, he was. I mean, he only started at 29, and he had. I think he had a very lucky career overall, even though he didn't have a lot of luck in later years. Because if you think about the lifetime of a Formula One driver, it's usually quite short. But he competed in 128 races. That's like, not many people can say that, right? And he did win the championship. When we were talking about Sterling Moss, remember it was like, he competed in so many, like 200 plus races, right? And didn't win a championship in the end. So it's just like, yeah.
Indeed, and as far as I remember, he had not been involved in any bigger accidents. Which is
yeah, that's right. And there was something, like I said, there was something always wrong with the car. So he was very close. So he had like very dangerous incidents with the tires and all that. So yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. But he competed in many races. I mean, he had a very good life in Formula One, for sure.
Exactly, but not. But he stayed a racer. He switched to the first in 1989. He returned for the 24 hours of Spa-Francorchamps, And here he drove Ferrari Mondial by the Moneytron team, a team which also had been linked to Formula One as they supported JJ Leto's protege, Rosberg, and we come to this, also had been active as a manager. So he was manager of his son, obviously, but also JJ Leto. So here he was first driving a Ferrari, and then he became involved with Peugeot's engagement in sports car, which have been quite successful, even if Rosberg himself never won the 24 Hours of Le Mans or the championship.
Mm-hmm. And then he was in the German touring car, right? And Patrick, do you remember this? Because I mean, I haven't seen definitely German touring car back in the day. I mean, it just wasn't available for me. Like I couldn't actually watch it, but it probably was also fascinating.
Yes,
Fascinating
in fact, I had the opportunity to see some of the races as I lived, for example, nearby Zolder. I saw them in Italy. So it was at that time a very spectacular series, as the cars practically had included more high tech than a Formula One car, which at the end, which made the series very spectacular. But at the end, also led to its sudden death after, I don't know, 5-6 years, as it became really too expensive. But it was really a very spectacular series, and here Keke Rosberg was one of the drivers for Opel, as you see in this photo, and also Mercedes-Benz. And in the last year or the last 2 years, well, for Mercedes-Benz, he had been driver and manager in the beginning, and then concentrated just being in the management position. As for a longer time, as he also had been manager for various drivers, he discovered he's not only a good driver, but also a good manager, something which we also see now with his son, Nico Rosberg, and which we may discuss already in our next episode. So not only a good driver, but also a good manager. And practically our next slide is already about this.
Yeah.
So first, he had been manager of JJ Lehto. I remember a very good, fast driver who never made it completely to the top, but was quite fast. And then unfortunately later I had a problem with a fatal accident caused by him, I think, with a boat, and maybe something with alcohol. I don't remember anymore. But also he had been the manager of another Finnish champion, Mika Häkkinen, and then later, of course, managing his own son.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, as a manager, he had a lot of success, we can say. Well, considering that Nico Rosberg won his championship in 2016, and I mean, we kind of we all know that this is only this kind of second father-son duo that both won the championship, right? So it was Graham Hill and Damon Hill as well. But if you think about it, well, obviously Graham Hill died in 1975 and Damon Hill won his championship in 1996. So he didn't really have support of his dad when he won the championship. And I think it's really remarkable story that you can compete and you can have your dad as your manager. I'm sure that that also carries a lot of issues, but it definitely was a very successful run with Keke Rosberg managing Nico Rosberg.
So. Yes, and besides he has been faster, I think it wasn't never that obviously that he always had been around. So maybe a little bit different than Max Verstappen, where you see Jos Verstappen always around. Until you see him in memes when
yeah, we need to do a special episode about dads, because Lewis Hamilton also has a really remarkable dad. So yeah, we definitely should do that. I mean, and you know, some like we mentioned before, right? Some drivers had the parents were from completely different career and yet very much involved, and some were from kind of similar like mechanical career or something like this, and they didn't share the passion at all. They just wanted the kids kind of to be working in the workshop rather than competing in championships. But yeah, so you know, obviously, you know, you have to understand that you know, karting and then formula, it's a very expensive hobby. And without parental support these days, I think it's very difficult to do, probably next to impossible to do. And it's great that there are parents who can afford that and who can really support their kids like that.
Indeed. Another great photo which you found here.
Yeah, there we go. That's again Keke Rosberg. I think that's also around 1982 when he won the championship. And yeah, and we're talking about his legacy. So and Patrick has chosen quite a lot of things for legacy, but I think his biggest legacy is probably Nico Rosberg. That's why I kind of sneaked in another picture. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Keke Rosberg with Nico Rosberg in this picture. And this is kind of very close to kind of the beginning of career of Nico Rosberg in Formula One. And as we know, it was a very successful career so far.
Right, and I think he not only supported him becoming fast and successful, efficient driver in Formula One, but I think also he coached him a little bit into management, as Nico Rosberg also today is quite successful as entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's right. And well, I mean, he made quite a lot of controversial claims, Keke Rosberg, because he says that, oh, it's genetic, kind of, the talent is genetic. I'm not so sure, because like I said, my opinion is that he mostly succeeded because of his perseverance and grit and not so much talent. I mean, he definitely has talent, don't get me wrong, but I think that the decisive factor for his career was actually, you know, hard work. And so is Nico, I think. Yeah, but you know, it's definitely very remarkable pair of people, and you know, very successful indeed in both sporting career and management, which is great to see.
Yep. Agreed. I thought we can have a short view on the many Finnish drivers. We have 1974, Leo Mikko. Yep, and then Mikko Kosarowiecki, 1977. Then I think the first one who really became successful, Keke Rosberg. Then a bigger number of very fast and talented driver, JJ Lehto, Mika Häkkinen, also
yeah,
champion.
One of my favorite drivers, Mika Häkkinen. So he's twice world champion, and we'll talk about him. And yeah, as if you are watching us on YouTube, you see his photo, and obviously Valtteri Bottas, who is the current Finnish driver that we have in the championship.
Yes, but let's say, and also not to forget Mika Salo, also a very talented, fast driver. Who
no, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're all brilliant drivers, and Kimi Räikkönen as well. But like, yeah, I mean, out of this list, probably Mika Häkkinen would be my favorite.
Yeah, right. They've been all very talented, very fast. Also, Mika Salo, who didn't made it completely to the top, but very fast. I remember as he replaced Michael Schumacher as he had his accident. Then we still had Heikko Kovalainen and, of course, Kimi Räikkönen, another of the Finnish champions. And today we have Valtteri Bottas, and I included here the photo because since this year, Valtteri has a mustache quite similar to Keke
Rosberg.
Drive times or in general, his new style is quite 1980s.
Yeah, I think some people might wonder why Nico Rosberg is not on the list. Well, he's not on the list
Right.
because he has dual citizenship of Finland and Germany because his dad is Finnish and his mom is German. But for financial reasons, very early in his Formula One career, he decided to ride for Germany. Obviously, you get better sponsorships, I guess, if you're driving for Germany than if you're driving for Finland. And yeah, that's why he's generally known as a German driver, although, his dad is from Finland. And like I said, he does have a dual citizenship. So
yeah, and he drove with a German super license. So officially for statistics,
yes,
they
exactly.
always played the German hymn, the German flag, because he used the German super license.
Yeah. So he initially had a Finnish super license, but then he switched. So yeah, and he switched for sponsorships reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and we still have some last fun facts. Finland and New Zealand have been the only countries which produced a Formula One championship, champion, or even two, if you want to exclude Nico Rosberg, if you want to include even three. So quite interesting. Never a Formula One Grand Prix in Finland. And if you like music, there had been a song, Keke Rosberg Formula Rock, by a Finnish artist, Matti Pelombre, from 1985. So when really Rosberg was still on top as a driver. And if you're interested, I included that song also in our data-driven mixtape or playlist, so you can find it on Spotify.
Yes, brilliant. I really like the cover. It's very random, considering that there's a song about Keke Rosberg.
Right. I think it was a little bit more related for children, if I'm correct. But anyway, judge yourself. We included this song in our data-driven playlist, which you can find on Spotify.
Yeah, with that, we came to the end of this episode. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And of course, by all means, tell us if we forgot something or misinterpreted something, or if you just want to comment on the current episode and suggest maybe some future topics for us. We're always happy to hear your opinions, and please subscribe. And we always appreciate likes as well. I just want to remind you that we are on practically all platforms, but YouTube and Spotify are our main platforms. So please consider those if you're listening to us.
Yeah.
With that, we say goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.